But to do that, just take a breath, take it all in, just sit with it a bit. As we change gears, let's go back to the initial problem, right? So we want to crowdfund liquidity for potentially a new token to be listed on Behodler. The act of porting that liquidity generates scarcity, which has its own value, and that scarcity can then be either distributed to the users, or it can be used in some indirect way to filter value to the users. So we then, on the next iteration, we said, well, what if we had a token like Sushi that's continuously minted to the users, so they get a continual reward from this token. And instead of giving the scarcity directly to those users, we rather just use it to purchase Flan, the reward token, on the open market, to give it occasional bumps in value. And this kind of smooths over the experience of waiting for migrations to happen, especially if the market expects regular migrations, or if it expects an imminent migration, it might price that in. So expecting the price of Flan to be bumped by an incoming migration will lead to the price of Flan, of course, rising before that, and so that smooths over the Flan volatility. But we can actually do more. So imagine you have a Uniswap pair of Flan and scarcity. You bring a bunch of new liquidity to Behodler and it generates scarcity, and you, as I said, you can use that scarcity to purchase Flan from the LP pair to bump up the Flan price. But you can do better than that. So what you can actually do is, so now remember that Flan is a token that we can mint at will. Now when I say we mint at will, I don't mean admins of Behodler can mint it at will. I just mean that it has the properties that it can be minted without requiring any deposits or so on. So what we could do is, let's say a migration happens. So let's say we we migrate a new token to Behodler, and let's say we generate $10,000 worth of scarcity. What we can do is we can inspect Uniswap and inquire what the current price of Flan is in terms of scarcity. So all we have to do is look at the ratio of Flan to scarcity in the LP pair. So let's say in this example we have an LP pair, and it currently has 100 scarcity in it, and it has 5,000 Flan. So now we know that one scarcity can purchase 50 Flan. But we know that that's the ratio. So let's say that we now generate a bunch of scarcity from a migration. Let's keep it in scarcity numbers, actually. That'll simplify things. So let's say we generate 50 scarcity from a migration of a new token. We know that the ratio of Flan to scarcity is 50 to 1, which means that we will need to accompany that. If we wanted to add that scarcity as liquidity to the pair, instead of using it to purchase Flan, let's say we wanted to add that scarcity as liquidity and generate an LP token, we would need an additional 2,500 Flan. But we can mint that. So what we do at the point of migration is we've generated 50 scarcity from adding liquidity to Behodler. We mint 2,500 Flan, and we pair them together and send them off to Uniswap. So what have we done? Let's say that that 50 scarcity is worth, let's say it's worth $10,000. We've now minted, by definition, we've minted $10,000 of Flan, and we've coupled it with the existing $10,000 of scarcity, and we've sent both of those tokens off to Uniswap, and then we've minted LP tokens. So in other words, we've from one migration we've minted up, or rather from one migration we've taken $10,000 and instantly turned it into $20,000 and sent it to Uniswap. And we haven't sent it as a bump to the Flan price. We've sent it at the current ratios, which means that liquidity on Uniswap for Flan and scarcity has now increased by $20,000. So that means that the price impact of a given flan trade on Uniswap will be less for any given value of flan, which means that we have more runway to mint flan as a reward token to users on Limbo. So in other words, we found out a trick to massively increase the liquidity of flan on Uniswap on every migration. And that increased liquidity means that flan can hold its value against cells, against more aggressive cells or against cells of the same value, which means that we can mint more flan and we can hand out more flan because it's less likely to lose its value. So if you run the numbers, if you actually go into the mechanics of Uniswap and so on, it does turn out that this strategy of minting flan and generating liquidity generates a lot more runway for us than if we were to just purchase flan off of Uniswap and hand that out as liquidity. That purchasing act doesn't actually increase the liquidity on Uniswap, which means that once we've handed out that purchased flan, or once we mint some new flan and hand it out, it's going to lose its value as quickly. The price impact is going to be just as hard as it was before the migration. With this new strategy where we mint flan and couple it with the new scarcity and send it all off to Uniswap and mint LP tokens, we gain a large amount of liquidity, and that allows us to then rest assured that if there are a bunch of users that sell flan, they're going to have less of a price impact, which means that we can mint more flan and we can hand it out. So essentially we've now got more power to push up the APYs on staking pools in Limbo, which means that we can either for the given pools we can have more aggressive APYs, or it means that we can list more concurrent pools so that we can have far more frequent migrations. Well, in either strategy you take, you're going to get more frequent migrations to Behodler, and because you get more frequent migrations to Behodler, you're going to get more liquidity added to the to the scarcity flan pool, and so there's a kind of positive feedback loop there. Now, why am I telling you all of this? You may be thinking like, can I just look at the code already? The crux of this is that when you look at the Limbo code, as I'll show you in a bit, the migration aspects manage all of this process. So all of that flan minting and matching the price and all of that happens under the hood in one of the migration contracts. So if you just sort of understand why that's going on and what's happening there, the code won't look so strange, because ordinarily when you read something that says migration, you just expect a transfer of one thing to another. But there's a lot of market action happening via Uniswap under the hood whenever tokens are migrated from Limbo to Behodler. Okay, so now we know where flan gets its value and why flan exists. It turns out that you get some increasing benefits to pricing of flan if you try to target flan to a stablecoin. So the final chunk of the migration logic is that the migration of new token capital, of staked tokens from Limbo to Behodler, which generates scarcity, which we then use to increase the liquidity of flan. There's an extra step where we manipulate the price of flan using that scarcity to try and target the price of DAI, so that we try to push flan towards parity with DAI on every migration. Now, I imagine, now this is just theory and conjecture, I don't have data because we haven't done this yet, but my instinct is that at first the flan price is going to swing quite volatilely. Is that a word? Well, anyway, it's going to be quite volatile in its swings around the price of DAI. It'll probably drop below the price of DAI, and then at migration it'll be pumped back up. At some migrations it'll be above DAI, in which case we'll push it down towards DAI, and there'll be a kind of back and forth seesawing around the price of DAI. But if you imagine orbital mechanics of planets, every time that happens, the orbit becomes more stable and the orbiting object loses some momentum and eventually they collide. With every migration from Limbo to Behodler, remember we're increasing the liquidity of flan, and as we increase the liquidity of flan, the ability of the market to knock the price of flan about off of the target of DAI becomes increasingly less. There comes a kind of a crossover point, I think, that as flan becomes reliably close to the dollar, or at least reliably close to the price of DAI, in other words, as flan reaches that 1-to-1 parity with DAI, market expectations begin to build, and the market begins to price in the expectation that flan will return to DAI. So in central bank history, this step of one currency approaching parity with another is called credibility. It's an increase in credibility. So as central banks begin to succeed at targeting their currency to another currency, it's said that their currency gains a credibility. And as their currency gains a credibility, the central bank actually has to do less because the market kind of takes it from there. The market stops resisting, stops speculating on the price of their currency being something else, and starts expecting it to be on par with the target currency. And then the central bank can take its hands off the rudders and things just kind of hum along. We're using the same sort of mechanics here. So although we don't tend to be big fans of central banking, there's a lot to be learned from the experiences of central banks over the years, and we're incorporating that into figuring out how flan can reach credibility. Now we've got a few more little levers that we can pull. So once flan starts approaching a credible parity with DAI, we can then deploy flan and DAI and flan and USDC and flan and USDT, flan and OUSD, flan and MIM, and flan and name your favorite stablecoin, Frax I guess. We can deploy these pairs to Uniswap version 3 because concentrated liquidity AMMs like Uniswap 3 thrive for stablecoin pairs because of the costs of falling outside of the price range. There's a disproportionate incentive for stablecoin providers on Uniswap 3, and it means that a disproportionate level of liquidity is concentrated in those pools. So once flan starts trading on Uniswap version 3, we get a massive return to liquidity for every dollar of flan added to Uniswap 3. And of course, what does that mean? It means that we can mint more flan. And if we can mint more flan, it means that we can either offer higher rewards on Limbo, or it means that we can reward more pools, more concurrent pools, or it means that we can pursue some other activity that benefits the Behodler ecosystem. For instance, minting a whole bunch of flan to bribe tokamak holders to list I or scarcity or flan in tokamak. Doing the same with Curve. In fact, we can pursue all of those governance model dApps where the governance token is supported by the demand to own the token in order to get your token listed. We can pursue those sort of bribe tokenomics on all of those with the increasingly liquid flan, and that doesn't sound delicious. And so there's a kind of a runaway effect, and eventually flan will, once we pass that threshold, once we enter into the bribe stage, flan will eventually become one of the highest cap stablecoins in the system, and then essentially the Behodler ecosystem has a central bank on demand that we can use to. When I say we, of course, I mean the Limbo DAO. I don't just mean the team or the admins or whatever. The DAO can use this new central bank to unlock all sorts of magical powers and bring all sorts of value to the ecosystem. And I haven't mentioned Pyro tokens, and any of you who have been in Behodler for a long time know that Pyro tokens are a very big part of the story in accelerating this. So, but it's nice to think that even without Pyro tokens you can get some pretty amazing runaway tokenomics happening. So that's the kind of goal that we have with flan. That's why flan exists, and that's why it's important to have flan as a distinct token from scarcity, because it allows us to set up flan first as a quasi stable coin, as a kind of hint stable coin, and then as a proper stable coin with credibility, and then as a super stable coin that people begin to price transactions in, like they do with the large stable coins, like the large centralized ones, USDC, DAI, and so on. I didn't mean DAI was centralized. I was going to say USDC, USDT, and then the decentralized ones like DAI and so on. That's pretty cool. Oh, and then of course, if you're a fan of Pyro tokens, which again, not the scope of this talk, but I would encourage you to look into that, you'll get PyroFlan, and if you get PyroFlan as a stablecoin, that's you get a thrift coin, and again, if you've been around this particular block, you'll know the benefits of a thrift coin. And so that's nice. So you get all sorts of nice things. So now you know why Flan exists, where it works in regard to Limbo, and with Behodler. Now, as a developer, as an auditor, there's still one or two more facets that you need to understand about the mechanics of Limbo, and then you just need to understand a little bit about the governance of Limbo, and then you'll be ready to jump into the code base.